Types of mergers: horizontal mergers, where two hospitals, all the ones examples I showed you are horizontal mergers. Vertical mergers, where healthcare physician practice in a hospital, for example, is a vertical merger where you've got different kinds of organizations. And then a conglomerate, where you've got a real mixture. There are hostile and there are friendly mergers. All of the ones I just showed you were friendly mergers. Essentially, in that case, the merger is supported by the managements and the boards of both firms. Hostile mergers are not, they can be down and dirty events. Essentially, in that circumstance, the target firm resists the takeover, and they will try a variety of tactics to avoid being merged or taken over. There's all kinds of regulations in both the for-profit and the not-for-profit sector that agencies that regulate mergers. Certainly the FTC and the Justice Department are probably the most important and probably the most prominent actors in this. And they are becoming more active than they have been in the past, just because the volume of merger activities has increased so much. Mergers involving not-for-profits are difficult. When a for-profit buys another for-profit, there's an exchange of shares, and everything is done simply. When a not-for-profit acquires a not-for-profit, again, it's fairly simple. They just merge, become one organization. However, when a not-for-profit is acquired by a for-profit, that becomes a lot more complicated, primarily for two reasons. The charitable trust doctrine, what is that? I'm going to put my cell phone on airplane now. This is my new toy.
There's a little button on the side.
Oh, really?
Flip open your case.
A bonus point there for teaching the old guy how to use new technology. What is charitable trust doctrine? Rochelle.
Money that was previously donated to be used for charitable purposes still has to be earmarked for that.
Exactly. So when I or you give money to a healthcare organization and you get a tax receipt and it's to be used for charitable purposes, then if that organization is taken over by a for-profit, the for-profit organization generally has to set up a foundation, a non-profit charitable foundation, so that the assets that were given to the not-for-profit in the expectation that it would be used for charitable purposes, that continues forever. So almost all mergers where a not-for-profit and a for-profit are merged or bought, there is a foundation set up. The outstanding tax-exempt debt, what that means is that a not-for-profit is allowed to, most of them have tax-exempt debt, and when it's bought by a for-profit, essentially the debt is redeemed, it's called, like we talked about last term, and the bondholders are paid off, and so the debt disappears, as it were. The debt in the new organization will all be regular debt. So there's a whole bunch of different reasons why right now, like I said, we're in the middle of merger mania. There is a boom in business for companies that go out and sorry, did you have your...
I do have a question. How does it work when there's a hostile takeover between two not-for-profits? So like when WakeMed tried to go after Rex a few years ago, because if it's for-profits they're going after, they try and just take over
the shareholders.
Right?
Right.
So
Right. So there will be. I mean, the answer to that is not always clear. Have you been following what's going on in Belhaven with Pongo? Pongo Hospital in Belhaven, North Carolina. It was Novant decided a year ago that it was going to acquire it and then it's going to close it and turn it into an ambulatory care center. So the community rose up. There were lawsuits launched against Novant, and eventually last Friday at noon they caved and they said now Pongo will remain open. So that's one example where there's community activism. There could be lawsuits. There can be, it may just happen. They may just say, we're so small, they're so big, we have no chance and they'll cave. On there, they may put up a fight. There's no rules. It really depends on the local circumstances and how many politicians are involved, and there's just no rule book that I'm aware of. It varies by circumstance to circumstance. Amy.
You say that now, like this merge, like M&A activity is really high right now. So, like that's consolidation essentially, right? Are there periods of deconsolidation, or like when M&A is reversed? Like you were talking about the entities that buy up other organizations to break apart.
Yeah, that's fairly rare, and a lot of I mean, HCA did that in Miami about 10, 15 years ago, where they bought 4 or 5 hospitals and then they sold one off and consolidated all the business in the remaining hospitals. It's not very common. Sorry, is that what you were asking? What's your question?
I guess so. Well, I mean, as consolidation is getting, like, as things consolidate, like they're
Unconsolidate?
Yeah, exactly. I mean, it gets to a certain tipping point. I feel like there can't be any more consolidation before it's all a monopoly kind of.
Right.
That's what I'm hearing.
Well, the most popular example that would be Brigham and Women's, and there was one other one in the 80s or 90s when the Brigham and Women's merged, and there was another partner, and then that lasted about 5 years, and then they divorced. It just fell apart because the culture of the organizations was so different. So it does happen, but it tends to happen for non-financial reasons. Sarah?
I was just going to say, actually, I had an interesting conversation with someone on Monday who's a part of the UCSF Stanford merger that fell apart, and she actually was talking about that same thing, that now, like, that's why she's, like, completely devoted to change management. Because she's, like, just no one wanted it. Like, the staff was so upset about it that even though they financially had really planned for it, she was, like, on the ground. It just wasn't ever going to work for us.
Yeah. Even though financially it might have made sense, you have to take into account.
And another question on Jill's question about WakeMed and Rex, was that part of what led to Bill Atkinson resigning, or was that?
I wouldn't even hazard a guess on that. I mean, and there were some Medicare dollars that had to be returned as well. So.
I mean, you think that? I mean, just having. I remember that being in the news because I was looking in Raleigh then, and I mean, it seems like really bad press. You know, the way it's worded because it's hostile takeover, and then the back and forth of the. You know, it seems like it can be really bad press for both organizations. So I just wonder about the ramifications of that.
Didn't that just sort of out and out buy Rex?
Well, there was.
Did they make an offer to UNC?
They made an offer of, yes, they made an offer that that was, well, I don't want to get into politics. They made an offer that they made an offer that the UNC board couldn't accept, but they did it to put pressure on UNC to assume more of the psychiatric care and all the levers that were pulled later on. It was a game of politics and negotiation and pressure. And a lot of it was egos, primarily middle-aged men egos.
So, like, if UNC had said, sure, WakeMed have Rex, would the game have been over?
I think that no one would have been more surprised than WakeMed. That's just my view. So can I move on past the controversial part of the class? I'm not party to any of those negotiations. You know as much as I do. So there's this whole industry out there of bankers, appraisers, consulting firms who do nothing else but go around and advise hospitals and health systems about how much they should pay to acquire another hospital, a physician group practice, or whatever. So acquisition is really what's driving this industry right now. Buyouts of one partner by another, again, that's more at the medical group practice level and estate tax purposes when the physician, for example, dies and they leave the estate, the practice has to be sold, then that needs evaluation as well. So generally, what we're doing in business valuation, what these consulting firms are doing is valuing the equity stake. In other words, we're going to acquire this asset, we'll pay off the debt, and what's left is the equity. And that's what we want to know. That's the purchase price of the asset. So as we just talked about a minute ago, the economic value of any business is the present value of future cash flows. And we're going to talk about three methods, 2 discounted cash flow methods and 1 market multiple method. And all of these are used in the real world. So we've got a simple example here, Westside Clinic, cost of debt, cost of equity, tax rate, and so on. And here are the forecasted income statements for the clinic. The net revenues, the depreciation, earnings before interest, taxes, and so on, net income is that. So this is just a typical pro forma income statement for the clinic. So there are 2 methods of discounted cash flow analysis, the free operating cash flow method and the free equity cash flow method. Free operating cash flow focuses on the operating cash flows, and free means that it's the cash flows that are available to both the debt and the equity holders. The free equity cash flow method basically values the organization, strips out the debt, and then thinks what are the cash flows available to the equity holders only. So the free operating cash flow method, we're going to estimate the cash flows that are available to the debt and the equity holders, and we're going to discount those cash flows by the corporate cost of capital. The free equity cash flow method, we're going to estimate the cash flows that are available to equity holders only, and we're going to discount those cash flows by the cost of equity capital. Not the corporate cost of capital, but the cost of equity. So let's go through what we mean by that. So the free operating cash flow is net operating profit after taxes. Essentially, it's NOPAT, which is, the definition is there, times 1 minus the tax rate. So what we're going to do here is take NOPAT, which is the earnings before interest and taxes, times 1 minus the tax rate, which is the 0.4, and that gives us line 1, as it were, there. We're going to add in depreciation. Why are we adding in depreciation? What kind of expense is depreciation? It's a non-cash expense. So it's a cash flow. So therefore, it is a forecasted operating cash flow. We're going to subtract total retentions. What total retentions are is the estimate of the consulting firm or the appraiser as to what capital needs are going to be required to keep this place running over the next 5 years. So we need to replace the hole in the roof. We need to expand the parking lot and so on. And so for this clinic, we're going to estimate that's going to be about $1 million a year. So the free operating cash flow is the net operating, the NOPAT minus or plus the depreciation minus the retentions. That gives us the free operating cash flow. That is the dollars, the actual cash coming in the door that will be available to both equity and debt holders. We're going to use the corporate cost of capital because we've got both equity and debt in the cash flows, and that we can calculate that to be 12%. That's the discount rate we're going to use on the operating cash flows. Now we also have, if we have a 5-year forecast, but we know that this clinic's going to go on forever. So we can use the constant growth model to estimate what the present value of the cash flows are from year 5 on, from 6 on. So the terminal value, as we talked about in a couple of classes ago. So just using the constant growth model, we got the 2.6 million per year times which is the 5th year. We have a growth rate of 4%, so we multiply it by 1.04. And we subtract it by the corporate cost of capital, which is the 12%, minus the 4%, which is the growth rate. So if we do that, we get a terminal value of $33.8 million. So here are the cash flows we are forecasting. This is just exactly what we calculated a minute ago, the 900,000, 1.6, 1.9, so on. Those are the free operating cash flows. We're going to add in the terminal value in the 5th year of 33.8. So these are the cash flows, the operating cash flows that we're estimating from Westside Clinic. So if we discount those 5 cash flows at 12%, we get a present value of $25.6 million. That is the present value of the operating cash flows. But what do we have to do? Well, that's both the debt and the equity. So we now have to strip out the debt of $8 million. And we do that, $25.6 million of which is the present value of the operating cash flows minus the $8 million debt. That leaves us with $17.6 million as an estimate of the equity value of the clinic. I'll stop here for a second. Does everybody follow the arithmetic of what I've done here?
How do you calculate the debt?
It's just given to you. It was given up here. At least I think it was. Or maybe it isn't. Yeah. Current market value of debt, $8 million. So, again, just to summarize, the first line is the net operating income after taxes. So that's what the operating income is going to be after taxes, plus depreciation, minus the retentions we need to maintain the organization from a capital perspective. So the free operating cash flow is the first line plus the second line minus the third line. We then find the terminal value. In other words, what's the value of the clinic from year 6 to forever, and we calculate that to be $33.8 million using the constant growth rate.
So retention is only capital costs, like only like how you keep the lights on, et cetera?
Yes. And then the total cash flow is the sum of the operating cash flows and the terminal value. And we discount all those cash flows at the corporate cost of capital. We then strip out the debt, 25.6 minus the 8, to get an estimate of the equity value to be $17.6 million.